looking at your most recent Quest economic update, it seemed to indicate we were headed towards recovery already. So can you give maybe a high-level summary of what you saw in recent reports and data trends?
Yeah, what we've seen recently is the trough of the economic crisis, the bottom of the downturn. It seems is likely occurred in April, in both in terms of GDP and the unemployment rate. It looks like the unemployment rate peaked in April and has come down since then. There are a number of real-time economic indicators that we look at. That a lot of the government data is kind of what happened yesterday as opposed to what's happening now or down the road. So we have been in the Quest group spending a lot of time looking at real-time data metrics. That indicates that as states have started reopening in May, continue to reopen in June, economic activity has really begun to pick up in a number of different fronts. And so we do see a pretty significant uptick in economic activity. And, there has been an uptick in cases more recently, kind of commensurate with or running in parallel with the reopening, and we'll have to see how that plays out.
All right, Bob Bixby, you jump on in here before I keep going with questions.
Yeah, well, I'll pick up where Bob left off there, which is that it strikes me this is a really difficult time to be doing what you're doing, trying to give people advice about where things are headed, because there's so much uncertainty. And it did look like with your last report that the economy was coming out of it.
Right.
It hit the trough. This may be the shortest recession that we've ever had. I mean, it could be like a 3-month recession or something. On the other hand, you see now the really big spike in cases in big places like California and Florida and Texas, Arizona, and places beginning to pull back again, even without a second wave, sort of in the middle of the first wave, I guess. And it is difficult to think of what effect that might have. Do you think that this, what we're seeing now, could dampen forecasts going forward, or do you think that the forecast pretty much assumed that there would be some dampening because of the ongoing effect of the virus?
Yeah, I think those are all exactly the right questions. It is a really difficult time to be doing this work. It's interesting when you look back in early March, a lot of the forecasts that were being put out either by the private sector or others, forecasting outfits, it took them a while to really catch up to economic circumstances. And even in early March, some of the forecasts thought that COVID-19 would have a relatively modest effect on the U.S. economy. But those forecasts rapidly changed, really within days, within a few weeks. But it did take a while for the forecast to catch up to circumstances. And it may be the case that that's what we're seeing again. I think it's kind of unknowable how what a resurgence of the virus will look like. People use various letter metaphors, a V-shaped, a U-shaped, the Nike swoosh, a sawtooth, a variety of different metaphors. I think early on, people thought we were hoping for a V-shaped. It looked more like a U-shaped. Then this consensus kind of moved to the Nike swoosh, a sawtooth recovery, or a hockey stick, the hockey reference. But then the resurgence in May was stronger than people expected. I think the sense was that unemployment would peak around mid-year, and then it became apparent it may well have peaked in April as opposed to mid-year. So the trough came earlier than we thought. The strength of the economy and the reopening in May, and then in early June was a bit stronger than I think people thought. And then people were then again talking about more of a U-shaped recovery, or maybe possibly a V-shaped recovery came back on the radar screen. But with the uptick in cases in significant places, as you mentioned, I think people are going to take another look at the forecast, and now it's probably drifting back to more of a U-shaped or Nike swoosh. This is fundamentally a health crisis that became an economic crisis, right? And so if this virus, with a normal flu season, it kind of subsides in the spring and then picks up again in the fall. And I think other major pandemics, there was a significant second wave that occurred in the subsequent fall, not so much right away. So I'm not a healthcare expert. I need to point that out, obviously. I think the uptick in cases is something that obviously we're going to have to continue to look at. It's going to have economic consequences, no doubt. State economies are going to have to deal with not only a resurgence of the virus, but also the policy response, more social distancing, and that's going to have an effect. I think the bigger question on whether there's a second wave in the fall is probably much more of an issue.